You did the thing. Maybe it was a Sunday afternoon, a trash bag in one hand and your entire bathroom cabinet in the other. And you went shelf by shelf and threw out anything with a sulfate.
Anything with a paraben, anything with a fragrance list you couldn't pronounce. You replaced it, jar by jar, with the ones that had the craft paper labels and the soft, hand-lettered fonts. The ones that told you a story about a founder standing in her own kitchen, stirring something small and pure into being because the rest of the industry had failed her too. You paid 3 times as much, and for the first time in years, your bathroom counter finally matched your values. Nobody warned you that behind more than one of those craft paper labels was a boardroom, a quarterly earnings call, and in at least one case, the exact same company that manufactures bleach. That's the gap I want to close for you today. I've spent my career inside this industry, watching formulas get built, watching them get diluted, watching a beautiful $200 cream get manufactured 3 buildings down from a $15 one, sometimes by the very same hands. And when Western clean beauty exploded over the last decade or so, I watched it from a slightly strange angle, because I come from a beauty culture that had already been obsessing over ingredient decks for years before clean became a marketing category here at all. So today, I'm walking you through 9 of the biggest names wearing the clean halo. And I'm saving the most shocking one for the last, because it isn't really about a bad ingredient at all. It's about 2 brands sitting right next to each other at the very top of this list, dressed up to look like total opposites that turn out to be, quite literally, the same company wearing 2 different outfits. Stay with me for that one. But before we start climbing, I need you to hold on to one idea, because every single item on this list hangs off of it. In the United States, the word clean, printed on a beauty product, means nothing. Not means very little. Means nothing. There's no legal definition. The FDA doesn't certify it, doesn't require testing for it, doesn't police it in any meaningful way. A company can print clean on a bottle of almost anything, as long as the product itself isn't literally unsafe to use, and there's no agency standing behind that word the way there's an agency standing behind organic on a carton of eggs or SPF 30 on a bottle of sunscreen. Clean isn't a formula. It's a feeling a marketing department decided to sell you. It has almost nothing to do with what's actually sitting inside the bottle. Sit with that for a second, because it reframes everything that's coming. Now, here's where my own background comes in, because I think about this a little differently than most beauty channels do. In Korea, if a company wants to print on a label that a cream brightens skin or softens a wrinkle or blocks UV rays, that isn't just a phrase a copywriter gets to choose. It's registered as a functional cosmetic, and before that claim is legally allowed to sit on a box, the company has to submit efficacy data to Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. Now, it isn't a perfect system, and it doesn't cover every kind of claim a brand might dream up. But it means that for a specific category of promise, a claim is something you have to prove. Not something you get to simply announce. And before you start thinking I'm about to tell you Korean beauty is the innocent hero of this story, it isn't. And I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. Korean companies play exactly the same ownership game as everyone else. Unilever's biggest beauty acquisition before it ever touched a single American clean brand wasn't American at all. In 2017, it paid $2.7 billion for Carver Korea, the company behind AHC, one of the most beloved skincare brands to ever come out of Korea. So this isn't a story about one country against another, or one philosophy against another. It's a story about the gap between a claim and a test. In Korea, certain claims are a test you have to pass. In America, right now, in this specific unregulated corner of the industry, a claim is a decision someone makes alone in a marketing meeting on a Tuesday, with nobody checking their work. And that's the whole thesis, really. Before we even get started, clean was never a fact. It's a feeling. Keep that in your mind, because it's going to explain every single brand on this list. Let's start at number 9. With a name so wholesome, it feels almost rude to include here at all. Burt's Bees. If you're picturing a barefoot beekeeper in Maine hand-pouring lip balm into little tins himself, I understand completely. That's exactly the image the packaging still wants you to picture. Bert Shavitz was a real person, and he really did keep bees in Maine, and for a while, that really was close to the whole company. But Bert sold off his ownership so early that by 2004, when a private equity firm bought 80% of Burt's Bees for $173 million, he wasn't even a shareholder anymore. He was later handed $4 million, only after publicly pointing out how little of the company's success had ever come back to him. And by every account, he remained for the rest of his life, mostly just a beekeeper who occasionally signed things. Then, in late 2007, the entire company, tins, story, and all, was bought outright by the Clorox Corporation. Yes, the bleach company, the one that also owns Glad trash bags and Hidden Valley Ranch. For just under $1 billion, none of this means the lip balm in your purse is dangerous. It isn't. The formulas are still generally simple, and beeswax is still beeswax. What it means is that every time you reach for that tin because it feels like a small act of rebellion against big beauty, you're actually handing your money to one of the largest household chemical companies in the country. The lip balm was never the problem. The story printed around it was. If what you want is a lip and body balm made by people who are still, in fact, the people making it, look for a genuinely small batch family-run apothecary in Stedig. Or if you'd honestly rather skip the story altogether, an unpretentious drugstore staple like Aquaphor never once claimed to be a Vermont cottage operation, so at least it isn't lying to you. Number 8 belongs to a brand that's been quietly owned by a conglomerate for almost 2 decades, and that recently gave federal regulators a genuinely alarming reason to look closely at its factory floor, Tom's of Maine. Tom and Kate Chappell started this company in 1970 with a $5,000 loan, and for over 3 decades it really was the scrappy, values-driven alternative to mainstream toothpaste it still markets itself as. Then, in 2006, Colgate-Palmolive, the number 1 toothpaste company on earth, bought an 84% controlling stake for $100 million. The Chappells kept 16% and a board seat, and the branding never really changed. Tom's of Maine still looks and talks like a small, independent Maine company on a mission. It has been a Colgate subsidiary since before some of you finished college. Here's why that ownership detail actually matters this time, and not just as a piece of ironic trivia. In November of 2024, the FDA sent a formal warning letter to Colgate-Palmolive and Tom's of Maine after inspecting their manufacturing facility in Sanford, Maine. Inspectors found a black, mold-like substance near equipment that touches the finished product. They found that water used to make batches of toothpaste, including at least one batch that was released and sold, tested positive for multiple types of bacteria, including a strain that can cause lung and blood infections, from samples the company itself had collected between 2021 and 2022 and had never properly investigated. The FDA also noted that the company had received roughly 400 consumer complaints about the color, taste, and smell of its toothpaste, and hadn't looked into those either. I'm not softening a might-be-dangerous story for you here. This is a federal warning letter on the public record about contamination in a facility making a product you put in your mouth twice a day. I want to be fair, because Colgate has stated publicly that it's working with the FDA to remedy the issues, and that finished products are tested before release. That's their position, and it's on the record, too. But think about this for a second. A company with the manufacturing resources of Colgate-Palmolive behind it. A company that can source ingredients, monitor water quality, and inspect a factory floor better than almost anyone in the industry still ended up here. Owning a giant was never automatically the protection people assume it is. It just means when something slips, more people are affected before anyone notices. If you want a toothpaste from a company that's actually still small enough to answer its own phone, look at David's, a genuinely family-owned, independently operated toothpaste business out of California, launched in 2015, sold in recyclable metal tubes with no parent conglomerate quietly standing behind the label pretending not to be there. Number 7 is a brand built entirely on the premise that a Hollywood actress could out-honest the entire beauty industry just by naming her company Honest, the Honest Company, founded by Jessica Alba in 2011. The trouble started early. In 2015, the company's SPF 30 mineral sunscreen, marketed as a safer alternative to chemical sunscreens, generated a wave of consumer complaints of sunburn, serious enough that customers were posting photos of their burns online and multiple class action lawsuits followed. Reporting at the time traced part of the issue to an earlier reformulation that had reduced the concentration of zinc oxide, the sunscreen's actual active protective ingredient. After customers complained the original version felt too thick and left a wide cast, the company maintained its sunscreen had passed independent third-party testing to FDA standards, and that's part of the public record too. I want to be precise here, because sunscreen isn't a place to be cute. The lesson isn't avoid sunscreen. It's that formulating a stable, effective mineral sunscreen is genuinely difficult, and a brand's marketing confidence is not the same thing as a stable formula. Then, in 2016, the Wall Street Journal commissioned independent lab testing on Honest's laundry detergent, which the company marketed as free of sodium lauryl sulfate, a synthetic cleaning agent. Honest had put on its own public list of ingredients it promised never to use. The testing found it there anyway. Honest disputed the findings, said it actually used a related but different compound, and eventually settled the resulting class action lawsuit in 2017 for $1.5 million, reformulating the product afterward. The company went public on the NASDAQ in May of 2021, priced at $16 a share, valued north of $1 billion. As of this recording, the stock is trading under $4. I'm not bringing that up to laugh at anyone's portfolio. I'm bringing it up because Honest is now structurally a publicly traded corporation that answers to shareholders every single quarter, the same as any other big, faceless beauty company you'd assume was the corporate alternative to it. The name on the bottle promises a founder's personal integrity. The legal structure behind it promises quarterly growth to institutional investors. Those two promises don't always point in the same direction. For a mineral sunscreen you can actually trust to have been tested rigorously before that number ever hit the label, look toward Korean sunscreens. Korea's efficacy testing requirement for sun protection claims means a company genuinely cannot put SPF 50 on a bottle without proving it first, which is a lower drama, higher accountability system than simply trusting the brand.
Number 6 might make you want to roll your eyes before I even finish the sentence, and honestly, I understand what we're But stay with me, because this one is about something more useful than jade eggs. Goop, Gwyneth Paltrow's lifestyle company.
which also happens to sell a full line of clean, high-end skincare, some of it priced well over $100 a bottle. In September of 2018, 10 California county prosecutors filed a consumer protection lawsuit against Goop, specifically targeting 3 products: a jade vaginal egg, a rose quartz vaginal egg, and an essential oil blend the company had marketed as capable of helping prevent depression. The prosecutors argued these claims, hormone balancing, improved bladder control, mood support, weren't backed by, in their words, competent and reliable scientific evidence. Goop settled quickly, paid $145,000 in civil penalties, agreed to refund any customer who'd purchased those specific products, and was legally barred going forward from making efficacy claims about any of its products without real scientific evidence behind them. To be fair to Goop, and I do try to be fair even to brands I find a little ridiculous, that settlement was about 3 specific wellness products, not about the skincare line as a whole. It doesn't mean every serum on that site is secretly snake oil. But here's why I still think it belongs on this list. It's one of the only documented, legally established moments where the gap between sounds healing and is actually true got measured in an actual courtroom, instead of just an ingredient list. Most of the brands on this list never get tested that way. Goop is the rare case where we got to see, in black and white, what the answer looks like when someone finally asks the question. If you want the glow from within promise without the legal asterisk. A plain, well-studied ingredient like squalane or rosehip oil does most of the heavy lifting people pay Goop's premium for. And you can find both in the Ordinary's lineup for well under $20. That brand, by the way, is now fully owned by Estée Lauder too, so nobody there is pretending to be an indie kitchen operation. It's just honest about being a lab. Number 5 built an entire aesthetic out of a made-up list. Drunk Elephant, founded in 2012 by Tiffany Masterson, who marketed her products as free from what she branded the Suspicious Six: essential oils, drying alcohols, silicones, chemical sunscreens, fragrance and dyes, and SLS. I want to slow down on that phrase, because it's doing a lot of quiet work.
Suspicious Six sounds like a scientific classification. It isn't one.
It's a marketing list invented by the brand that groups genuinely irritating ingredients for sensitive skin, certain drying alcohols, for instance, right next to ingredients that are simply unfashionable in the clean beauty conversation, like silicones and fragrance, which the vast majority of dermatologists will tell you are perfectly fine for most skin types, and which, in the case of silicones, are often exactly what makes a moisturizer feel silky instead of greasy. Bundling genuinely irritating for some people together with just currently out of style under one official-sounding banner is clever branding. It is not a scientific finding.
In October of 2019, Shiseido, the massive Japanese beauty conglomerate that also owns NARS, Bare Minerals, and Laura Mercier, bought Drunk Elephant outright for $845 million, one of the largest acquisitions in skincare history at the time.
Masterson stayed on as chief creative officer, and the brand's whole industry outsider identity kept right on selling, just from inside one of the largest beauty companies on the planet. I'm not telling you Drunk Elephant's products are bad. Plenty of them are genuinely well formulated, and I won't pretend otherwise. I'm telling you the entire brand identity is built on protecting you from a suspicious industry that it is itself now a wholly owned division of. The Suspicious Six was never really about your skin. It was about making you suspicious of everyone except this one brand, right up until this one brand quietly joined the very industry it taught you to distrust. If what you actually want is a gentle, Centella-forward formula without the manufactured villain list, look toward Korean pharmacy skincare built around CICA and barrier repair. The ingredient story is genuinely simpler there, because there isn't a branded list of enemies standing between you and the ingredient deck.
Number 4 sells you an entire country's beauty ritual in a jar, at a price that has nothing to do with the country it's borrowing from. Tatcha.
Founded in 2009 by Victoria Tsai, Tatcha built its identity around the beauty rituals of Kyoto geisha, rice, green tea, and algae, packaged with genuinely gorgeous design, sold at genuinely prestige prices, with a water cream that runs upward of $70 for 50 milliliters. In June of 2019, Unilever, yes, the company behind Dove, Vaseline, and Axe body spray, acquired Tatcha for a reported figure approaching $500 million, folding it into the same prestige portfolio as Murad, Hourglass, and Kate Somerville. Here's the part I actually want you to notice, though, because it's bigger than Tatcha specifically. It's about how selective this kind of authenticity marketing gets to be. A jar leaning on centuries of Japanese beauty tradition, wrapped in soft, minimalist packaging, reads as artisanal and spiritual to Western shoppers. A jar leaning on decades of Korean dermatology research, dressed the exact same way, tends to get marketed here as merely innovative or clinical instead, even when the underlying formulation science is every bit as rigorous and often considerably cheaper because it hasn't been repackaged through a Western luxury lens yet. The story a brand tells about where its ingredients come from is doing enormous pricing work that has almost nothing to do with what's actually in the bottle. None of this makes Tatcha a bad formula. Water cream is a perfectly nice moisturizer. But you're paying a very large premium for the ritual, the rice paper, and the acquisition-fueled marketing budget of a company that also sells shampoo in gas stations. And that premium is the actual product you're purchasing, more than any single active ingredient inside the jar. For the same rice and fermentation philosophy, at a fraction of the price, look directly at the Korean brands Tatcha's whole aesthetic is quietly borrowing from. Number 3 is the one I think should genuinely upset you a little, because unlike everything else so far, this isn't a story about quiet, comfortable ownership. This is a story about a mission that got sold and then got left to die. Beauty Counter. Greg Renfrew founded Beauty Counter in 2013 with what was, by every account, a real and specific mission, advocating for stronger cosmetic safety regulation in the United States, building a public never list of roughly 1,800 ingredients the brand pledged to avoid, and actually walking members of Congress through legislation on personal care product safety. This wasn't a brand that just borrowed the language of activism. For close to a decade, it was one of the genuine, credentialed leaders of the clean beauty movement, sold largely through a network of independent consultants who believed in the cause and built their own small businesses around it. In April of 2021, the Carlyle Group, one of the largest private equity firms on the planet, acquired a majority stake in Beauty Counter in a deal that valued the company at $1 billion. At the time, it was framed as a partnership, fresh capital to fast-track growth for the mission. What actually followed was several years of leadership turnover. A new CEO in 2022, another change in 2023 hours, and declining performance that a private equity firm, unlike a founder with an actual cause, has very little patience for. In March of 2024, Carlyle made the decision to walk away from its investment entirely. The following month, Beauty Counter went into administration, the formal process a company enters when it can no longer meet its obligations and effectively runs out of road. Sit with that for a second because I think it's the most honest data point on this entire list. This wasn't a brand quietly humming along inside a conglomerate's portfolio, coasting fine on a founder's old story the way Burt's Bees or Tom's of Maine still are. This was the brand that arguably worked hardest and most publicly to earn the word clean. And when private equity's growth targets weren't met, the mission wasn't protected, it was abandoned. The consultants who'd built their livelihoods around it, and the customers who paid a premium specifically because they trusted the never list, were the ones left holding a company that no longer existed. Clean was never a fact, it's a feeling. And feelings, it turns out, don't show up on a balance sheet, which makes them the very first thing to go when a balance sheet stops looking good. If you were loyal to Beauty Counter, for its ingredient philosophy specifically, look towards smaller, founder-led lines like Ilia or RMS Beauty for a similar approach without $1 billion valuation attached. Though I'll say plainly, nothing on this list, mine included, comes with a guarantee against being bought tomorrow. Now we arrive at the 2 I promised you at the very top of this video, and I want you to pay close attention to how differently they're positioned, because that contrast is the entire point. Number 2 is Well People, style W3LL People, one of the actual early pioneers of clean color cosmetics, plant-based formulas, EWG-verified products sold through Whole Foods, Credo, and the detox market, the specialty retailers that only carry brands they've vetted as genuinely clean. This is a brand that, like Beauty Counter, did the real work early, years before clean beauty was a shelf category any major retailer had space for. In February of 2020, ELF Beauty, the publicly traded mass-market cosmetics company best known for $5 eyeshadow palettes at Target, bought Well People for $27 million. It was ELF's very first acquisition, its opening move into the clean beauty category. And the brand has quietly continued selling under the ELF Beauty umbrella ever since. Its founders staying on, its clean beauty pioneer identity fully intact on every label. Now hold on to that. ELF Beauty, publicly traded, New York Stock Exchange, owns Well People. Got it? Good. Now here's who else they own. Because in August of 2023, that same company, ELF Beauty, the parent of clean beauty pioneer Well People, signed a deal to acquire Naturium for $355 million, more than 13 times what it had paid for Well People 3 years earlier. And that brings us to number 1. Naturium is styled almost as Well People's opposite. Where Well People leans plant-based and clean certified, Naturium leans clinical and ingredient forward. Vitamin C complexes, peptide serums, retinaldehyde, the whole dermatologist Instagram aesthetic, built with beauty journalist and YouTuber Susan Yara, and propelled by a Los Angeles brand incubator. It sells at Target, right next to Well People, marketed to a slightly different customer with a completely different visual language. Glossy and clinical, almost lab coat versus Well People's soft botanical earth-toned packaging. 2 brands, 2 completely different promises, 2 different women walking down the same skincare aisle, each one certain she's making a distinct, deliberate choice between clean and clinical. And at the register, in the boardroom, on the quarterly earnings call, both of those purchases land in exactly the same place. ELF Beauty's revenue line. The company isn't hiding this, by the way. It's right there in their own investor materials, framed proudly as smart portfolio strategy, reaching 2 different shopper mindsets under one efficient operational roof. That's honestly a completely reasonable business decision. What it is not is two independent brands competing for your trust based on two independent philosophies. It's one company selling you both sides of an argument and collecting the win either way you choose.
That's the itch I told you about at the top of this video. Scratched. I don't want to leave you standing in your bathroom with a trash bag again, because that's not actually the takeaway here. And throwing everything out and starting over is exactly the reactive, anxious buying pattern that got most of us into clean beauty in the first place.
So let me give you the calmer version, the one I actually use. First, stop reading the front of the label and start reading the back of it. Every regulated market on Earth requires ingredients to be listed in descending order of concentration, which means the first 5 names are doing roughly 90% of the work in that formula, and everything after fragrance is mostly there for texture and stability, not headline performance. A clean label with a beautiful founder story means nothing if you never look underneath it. This is one thing Korean beauty culture genuinely got right early, and exported well before clean became a Western marketing category. The whole 10-step routine wave of the 2010s trained an entire generation of women to actually recognize ingredient names on a box instead of just trusting the box.
Second, separate the ownership question from the safety question, because they are not the same question. And I don't want you leaving this video thinking conglomerate owned automatically means worse.
It doesn't. Some of the best performing, most rigorously tested formulas in the world come out of large companies with the budget to actually run real clinical trials that most tiny independent brands simply can't afford. The problem was never that a giant owns the brand. The problem is when the brand keeps selling you the indie story after the ownership already changed, and lets you keep paying the indie premium for a mass market supply chain.
Third, when you're deciding whether a clean price tag is worth it, do the actual math. Price per ounce, not price per feeling. Set 2 products side by side, the earnest craft paper one and the boring drugstore one, and just divide.
More often than either of us would like, the fancier one is winning purely on story. And fourth, gently, give yourself permission to enjoy a product simply because it works and feels good on your skin, independent of who owns it or what movement it claims to belong to. That's allowed. The goal was never for you to become paranoid in your own bathroom. The goal is for you to spend your money on your terms, with your eyes open instead of a marketing department's. A few honest notes before I let you go, because I'd rather you hear these from me than discover them yourself and stop trusting the channel. Ownership in this industry moves fast. Brands get bought, sold, and occasionally, like Beauty Counter, wound down entirely. Sometimes within the 18 months, it takes a video like this one to age. Treat everything I've told you tonight as an accurate snapshot of where things stand right now, and as a map of the kinds of questions worth asking about any clean brand, not as a permanent, unchanging shopping list you never have to think about again. Please also don't take anything I said about Honest Company's sunscreen history as a reason to skip sunscreen, or to distrust mineral sunscreen as a category. That would be exactly the wrong lesson. Sunscreen is one of the very few products in your entire routine with genuinely overwhelming evidence behind it, and the real takeaway is narrower than avoid sunscreen.
It's formulating a stable, effective mineral sunscreen is hard, so buy from a brand with a real testing track record and reapply properly no matter which one you choose.
And if you're trying something new because of this video, a new sunscreen, a new active, a Korean brand you've never used before, patch test it first on the inside of your arm for a couple of days. The same way I'd tell you to test literally anything new at our age, when skin has a little less patience for surprises than it used to. None of this is about fear. It's about walking in with your eyes open instead of your guard up. Here's the bigger thing I actually want you to take from this past the 9 brand names, because the names themselves will be out of date eventually, and this idea won't be. Clean beauty was never really a category of ingredients. It was a response to a feeling. The feeling that the beauty industry had been lying to us for decades about what was actually going into our bodies, which, to be fair, it often had been. And into that very real, very justified distrust walked an entirely new marketing vocabulary, one that didn't require a single new safety standard, a single new regulation, a single new test. It just required a craft paper label and a founder's handwriting. The genius of clean as a marketing word was never that it described anything. It's that it let every company in this industry, giant and tiny alike, sell you the same feeling of safety without a single one of them having to actually prove it. And here's the twist I want to leave you with, because I think it's more useful than simply telling you to distrust everyone. Being owned by a giant company was never actually the danger. Some of the most rigorously tested, most consistently formulated products sitting in your bathroom right now come from exactly the kind of massive conglomerate this whole video has spent naming. The real danger was always neglect, and a factory that stops checking its own water. A mission that gets abandoned the moment a spreadsheet stops cooperating. A company that keeps selling you yesterday's story long after today's ownership chart has completely changed. Giant was never the enemy. Neglect it is. Clean was never a fact. It's a feeling, and you're allowed to enjoy a feeling. I actually think you should, as long as you stop paying a premium for it while mistaking it for a fact. So tell me in the comments, honestly, no judgment from me, because half of my own bathroom used to look like this too. Which one of these 9 is sitting on your counter right now, and which one are you finally ready to stop overpaying for? I read every comment on these videos, and I genuinely want to know which brand surprised you the most. And if this kind of digging is useful to you, the ownership charts, the receipts, the here's what's actually happening behind the pretty label approach, subscribe, because that's the whole promise of this channel, not to tell you what to be afraid of, but to tell you what's actually true, so you get to decide for yourself. Next time, I'm going through the fragrance industry's best-kept secret, and I promise you, it's an even bigger one than this.